So, welcome Jahan to Emanations of Love. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for agreeing to talk to us today. We met recently at Medicine Festival and we had several conversations regarding biodynamics, Steiner, alchemy, various fascinating subjects. And I'm delighted that you've agreed to talk to us today about your own personal journey that led you into that field. It's quite fascinating. So, where
Yeah.
would you like to begin?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've kind of been in biodynamics now maybe for around 2 years, and everything about it's been so transformational, including my journey into it. So yeah, let's start with, I guess, let's rewind to about two years ago, 2.5 years ago, where I was working in London. I was living and working in London, and I was working in a design agency in central London, and it was a very successful design agency. And everything in my life up to that point kind of been leading me to a corporate career, or basically a career in the city that was going to set me up to, have a nice house, have a big family, all of the things that I think were probably conditioned into me from I went to boarding school. And I remember at boarding school, it was very much a thing about, if you want to have kids, don't you want to give them the education that you had? And that's going to cost £30,000 a year per child. And so you're thinking, where the hell is this money going to come from?
Yeah.
I think that was really a big driver into a lot of the decisions I was making in my life, and where my life was going was very much was coming from a place of this kind of fantasy family that I didn't have yet, but I'd kind of created in my mind, where I wanted my children to have the same education that I'd had, and have the same opportunities that I'd had. And and I think a few big experiences along the way made me start to realize that money really doesn't buy happiness. And we hear that and it's become quite a platitude and a cliche, but
Yeah.
I think I had to really experience that, and being surrounded by people who were very wealthy, and were living in serious comfort and had everything that we're told is what, you'll be happy once you have XYZ. I saw
Yeah.
people with XYZ plus, and they were miserable. And so I think experiencing that was for me a big kind of, wait a minute, what is happiness? Why is it so hard to attain, even when you've got all the money and all the opportunity and all the freedom?
Yeah.
Why are people still depressed? Why are people still anxious? Why are people still, actually, if anything, more? They have more of that anxiety. They have more of that kind of all those pressures, and there's a real lack. It's quite ironic, isn't it? It's like you
Yeah.
have all the material, but spiritually you're lacking. And so I think that was a big journey into spirituality for me. And I come from quite a spiritual background anyway.
Yeah.
My mum's quite spiritual, but it was something that, as a young male, I guess, as well, I didn't really want to be interested in anything my mum was interested in. And so for me, spirituality
Yeah.
also got lumped into this thing that my mum's into. She was really into like alternative health and spirituality and all these things, which I kind of said, oh, that's my mum's stuff. I'm not going to touch that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that was basically my entry, my first real entry into asking quite spiritual questions.
Yeah.
Is there more to life than this material reality, this material kind of longing that I've been told is my journey in life, what I need to be pursuing?
Yeah.
And I think, these kind of questions start to coincide with my first job.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I mean, looking back, my first job was, I mean, I landed into one of the best kind of jobs possible for a young person. I was in London. The studio was very progressive. It was very social.
Yeah.
They're an international company with offices in London, San Francisco, Copenhagen, and New York. The
Yeah.
work that they were doing was pretty progressive. It was a young company, a lot of fun to be had, And coming in, that was exactly what I was looking for. So a lot of that was, you know, it was a distraction at first, in the sense that in my first year and a half, there was so much fun to be had at the company. You didn't really question anything deeper into like, what's my purpose, or why am I doing this? Am I doing any good? And then I think as my time in that company started to progress, and you know, a lot of stuff became normalized,
Yeah.
I started to ask those deeper questions of, you know, I'm spending long hours in the office. I'm sacrificing a lot of my time that I could be. I've always loved being in nature, so I've always thought about, if I'm sat in an office looking at a computer screen, that for me is a trade-off.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I could be out in nature enjoying the outdoors, but I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And so I think at that point I really started to question, yeah, is this the right path for me? I mean, this, everything that I've done up to this point has kind of been leading me to having this kind of job, but actually, who was making those decisions, and why was I being led down this path? And I
Yeah.
think that very much coincided with a more spiritual longing and searching, which then had me questioning my kind of role in my job even more, because in my job, spirituality was really taboo. You couldn't really talk about spirituality. It's not something that people in the city and kind of people in industry like talking about. It's kind of this thing that, you know, you do that in your own time,
Yeah.
and it's a
Yeah.
personal thing. So yeah, so I found that I wasn't able to be my authentic spiritual self
Okay.
in that kind of environment, and
Yeah.
so eventually it just started to make me really, really unhappy. And I you know, got to a point where I was getting up every day and just like waking up and then kind of feeling that dread of, oh God, I've got to go through that again. And then you end
Yeah.
up just trying to live for the weekend, and the weekends are kind of the time where you can actually do what you want to do, and the rest of the time is essentially you're doing stuff you don't really want to do, which
Yeah.
is not a nice place to be. So it was a bit of a mental battle with myself for a while, where there's two versions of me in my head. One was the old me, which
Yeah.
was the one that had been on this path and had got this great first job after doing an internship, and you know,
Yeah.
doing all the university and all the stuff that you're told that you need to do to be
Yeah.
successful and
Yeah.
independent and all these kind of things. And that was that one side of me which was like, look what you've got, you can't let go of this, even though you're
Mm.
unhappy right now. That's
Yeah.
just a temporary thing, you'll get over it, you're just being young and naive, blah, 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 blah. And
Yeah.
then there was this other side of me which felt a lot more authentic, felt a lot more who I actually am, saying, what the hell are you doing? You're wasting your time, you're a young person, you're not living a very healthy life, it's not a healthy lifestyle what you're
Yeah.
doing. You're spending most of your time in an office looking at a screen, and you know, and it just, there's this disconnection that I kept feeling, and there was that side of me which was winning, but there were some days where the other side won. So I was in this really weird mental battle where some days I was going to the office and I was like, I'm quitting, this is it, this is not for me, I need to look at something else. And then
Yeah.
there'd be some days I'd go in and it would be like, you're being an idiot, what are you throwing away? And
Mm.
this kind of like, this kind of quarrel with myself, I guess, was going on for months.
Yeah.
And obviously that also then caused my mental state and my physical state to kind of, that's obviously not a healthy place to be when you're kind of just
No.
like in a mental battle with yourself the whole time. And I think then on top of that, it was the type of work I was doing. I was a strategist and analyst, but
Mm.
as a designer as well. Very,
Right.
very in your head. You know,
Yeah.
you're doing a lot of abstract problem solving. You're doing a lot of kind of, yeah, just like big mental tasks and trying to come up with ideas left, right, and center. So
Yeah.
my head was traveling at, you know, a million miles an hour, but my
Yeah.
body was really just sitting at a desk, kind of, you know, typing away, moving a mouse around. So I
Yeah.
really felt this really big kind of mind-body disconnect.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I mean, quite literally, my mind was doing one thing, and my body was not reciprocating all that activity. So
Right.
I'd come home I'd come home most days and I'd be mentally exhausted, but
Yeah.
physically I'd done pretty much nothing. So I think, so that was another thing I think was just leading me down this, in some ways, a bit of a breakdown, a bit of a burnout,
Yeah.
which I really needed. It was really hard to go through at the time, but
Yeah.
I very much needed it. And I came out of that and I left my job, and it felt like I was really at a clean slate because I was very, very lucky to have my parents home to kind
Yeah.
of go back. I don't know what I would have done if I had to, continue to pay rent and have all those bills, etc., etc. But I had that kind of safety net, and I went
Yeah.
back home to my mum's house, and I really just for the first time really said, okay, let's remove like finance, let's remove all the societal kind of pressures and
Yeah.
conditioning and all the whatever else is telling me I need to be. What do I want to do? What's going to be the best for me, my mental health, my physical health? Also, I've always been really, really passionate about nature and the environment. What can I do where I genuinely feel like my action is making an impact in this world in a positive way?
Yeah.
So I think those questions I was really, really contemplating for the first time quite seriously. And I remember that I said that, okay, obviously when you come out of something, your natural feeling is to want to go to something that's a shift in the right direction, but a shift, not a leap. And so I was
Yeah.
looking for shifts. I was looking for little kind of pivots where I would go to something new and fresh and more me, but I wasn't leaving that old world behind completely, just in case it's the wrong decision kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
was still
Yeah.
I was still looking at kind of office work. I was still looking at doing like design and strategy and that kind of thing. But I was saying I only want to work at sustainability. I only want
Right.
to be doing stuff which I feel is very pro-environmental. It's very kind of, it's not generally not for-profit work.
Yeah.
It's not anything that's going to be fueling consumerism or fueling our waste problems, etc., etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I did 3 months of freelance with a consultant, and we ended up doing 3 months on a sustainability project, and and I and I did the 3 months, and I still had that feeling of I don't think I'm actually doing anything that's truly helpful or changing things. I think it very much felt like what people now call greenwashing, which was like
Okay.
you do a
Yeah.
little bit of good, which that company can then PR, but actually 80% of that company is still very unsustainable,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
aren't genuinely, like they
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
love to be sustainable, but they're more interested in making a profit than truly being sustainable.
Yeah.
Um,
Sort of keeping up
so I felt,
appearances.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I felt after 3 months and that 3 months, I luckily I was able to work from home. This is before COVID and the lockdown, where working from home has now become like the most normal thing.
Normal thing. Yeah.
Yeah, this was an opportunity to be at home, try something essentially, work
Yeah.
freelance for a couple of months, and just see if that was the right transition or if that was my right next step. And
Yeah.
actually, it just made me realize that even the kind of the good, the good ethical work just didn't feel genuine. And I
Yeah.
think I was at this point, that kind of that genuine self within me, the one that was very much listening to my heart rather than listening to my head,
Yeah.
was winning a lot of the battles essentially. So I was
Yeah.
listening to that side of me a lot more. And I just said, this doesn't feel right either.
Yeah.
So that then left me really kind of a bit, okay. So that means that everything that I've known in my past, everything that I've been trained for, kind of have to leave that behind, which is obviously really scary. But I was
Yeah.
like, I really need to do something that's fully new and fully that feels right. And that was actually the first time that I really thought about doing something with the land,
Okay.
because that was where I was thinking, where am I happiest? I'm actually
Yeah.
happiest out in nature when I'm out, yeah, blue sky. Well, it doesn't have to be blue skies, but open air, fresh
Yeah.
air.
Yeah.
Working around with nature. And then I was thinking, okay, so lovely, want to be out in nature. What can I be doing that's going to allow me to live a life, and make me some, give me some security, give me some independence, but also allow me to be in nature. And that was the first time I really considered farming, because my grandfather has a farm out in India.
Mm.
And that's always been a place that I've loved going back to. It's actually probably my favorite place on the earth. And I've traveled all over the place, and I've experienced some amazing stuff. But that farm that in India was always this place that's had a place, had a really special place in my heart. And it was a place that I've spent a lot of time with as a child. And that was a bit of land that was really calling, and I was thinking, whoa, okay, could I be a farmer? At the time I was 26, 27, never really done any never done any of that kind of work before. And I was thinking, can I do this? Is this even something is possible? So I started to look around at what type of farming that I could potentially do, because the farm in India is organic, and we've been organic for 12 years. But I've known for a while that organic just wasn't quite enough. And a lot of that's through my mum. My mum's been very, very passionate about health and food. And she'd been shopping at Biodynamic farms for the last kind of 5 to 10 years. One of her main reasons for that was because she found that the organic standard was fluctuating a lot. She sometimes she'd get a really great organic product, and then sometimes you go somewhere else and the same fruit or the same piece of meat would be just a whole different quality depending on where you were getting it. And this organic standard seemed to be either really good or
variable.
Variable. And so then she found these biodynamic farms which obviously have one standard. And she found that the farms tended to be community farms, and it was a really lovely place to visit. And obviously the quality of the food was just much better. So that was my only that's the only way I kind of even knew or had heard about biodynamics. I didn't know much about it, but I just knew that for me it was like the best quality organic. So I started to look into biodynamics. And luckily we have two biodynamic farms quite near where my mum's house is. So I started to look into it, and I started to realize, oh, okay, wow, there's so much more to biodynamics just than being organic, And now the way I think about it now is that organic is quite a negative statement. It's a statement about what you don't do. We don't use chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and that's pretty much the only thing that qualifies you to be organic, that you're not using these artificial chemicals. But actually I can be organic and I can still have a monoculture. I can be organic and I can still have really terrible animal welfare. So organic for me is it's very much a statement about what you're not doing. Whereas things like biodynamics and regenerative farming are very much a positive statement about what you are doing.
With integrity.
Yeah, exactly. Putting forces back into the soil, or building carbon in the soil, or trying to make your land better than what it was before. It's a very positive way of going about it, rather than being like, oh, we're organic, we don't spray this and we don't spray that.
So you're putting in more than you take out, really.
Exactly. And I think that was really key, kind of feeling a really positive energy from the farms and the philosophy behind the farming. It really felt like it was completely different. And then obviously there was a really big focus on diversity and biodiversity, which was another thing that I was very passionate about, because I've been aware of climate change, the climate crisis. For me, the thing that was even more alarming was this biodiversity loss, and how so many species are just kind of hurtling towards this extinction, and insects in particular are just this like an insect apocalypse, and the number of insect species that we're seeing is just decreasing drastically year on year. So I was really alarmed by this. And it seemed like the mainstream conversation around the environment was so focused on emissions and basically getting us to be carbon neutral and reducing the emissions, less flying, less driving, all of these things were being, but biodiversity was just being ignored. You know, the destruction of nature was being ignored. So it felt like the conversation wasn't whole. And that was another thing I felt really passionate about with biodynamics when I kind of started to hear about how important diversity was. Sorry, 1 second. How important biodiversity. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my mum was just bringing me some tea and biscuits.
Oh, bless her. Thank you, Mum.
So I think the focus on biodiversity was really important, and because that's another thing for me, which organic, you can see about monoculture, and that's a big problem with doing, and I think Vandana Shiva talks about the monoculture of the mind. And I think we're also seeing that in the way people are thinking. It's like very polarized and very much.
Yeah.
And I think being able to break out of this monoculture is needed, not just for the way we farm, but also the way we think and the way we live. So that was another really kind of, basically everything I was hearing about biodynamics just kept kind of, I had this feeling of it just kind of lifting me and elevating me, and it felt like, whoa, this is definitely like way bigger than I even ever imagined it to be. And then this kept happening, because then I was like, okay, so kind of, you know, organic tick, biodiversity tick. Then I started to kind of look at, okay, so there's a spiritual aspect to this, which obviously was coinciding with my spiritual journey. And I was looking for something where not only could I be out in nature, but I also wanted to evolve my spiritual practice and go deeper into spirituality. And the fact that this whole farming method was coming from a spiritual place was just another massive plus for me, which felt, okay, this is definitely right. And because I really thought when it came to doing work and doing work, especially around the environment, it wasn't just a physical thing that we were healing. We need to be healing something much deeper than that. And it has to come from a spiritual place. It has to come from a place of truth, where we're looking at things from the whole. Because if we're not looking at things holistically and from a whole perspective, you're never going to truly solve it. It's always going to be a kind of, you know, a solution that is a bit kind of incomplete and fragmented. Yeah, exactly. And I've seen this a lot, where, you know, people come in with the best of intentions and come up with a solution, and because that solution hasn't come from a kind of a whole place, actually that solution ends up leading to more problems, which was actually way bigger than the problem that it was trying to solve. I think, I mean, for me, plastic comes to mind. I remember when plastic was first invented, it was seen as this huge wonder material. You know, people are saying, oh, okay, if we can start using plastic, that means we can use less wood and paper. That means deforestation can go down. Plastic's this amazing material, which is, you know, so sturdy and lightweight, and so we can, you know, carbon footprint will go down because we can transport more stuff in lighter packaging and And obviously, when it came in, no one was thinking long term as to, like, what's going to happen to this stuff when it gets chucked away. So I think for me, that was the type of thinking I was really trying to avoid. I was saying, you know, I really want to find something that was coming from a very deep and spiritual place, which again, biodynamics just kind of ticked. And then finally, the thing that just kind of, and this really, I didn't truly understand this side of biodynamics until I met this amazing person called Bryony, who's a biodynamic preparations maker at Tablecloth Farm. And what happened was I'd done my kind of desk research, which had given me information on biodynamics, but I still didn't truly know what it was. But I knew that it was, you know, diverse, biodiverse organic farming. I knew there was a spiritual element to it. and it felt like it was ticking all the boxes. So that was the thing
Yeah.
that kind of allowed me to pursue it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know what it was until I kind of actually went to the farm and started talking to some of the people who have been doing this type of farming, you know, for people like yourself and people who've been in this world for quite a long time. And I went to a place called Emerson College,
Yeah.
which is actually attached to Tablehurst Farm, and it used to be. It's building up again. They're starting to have biodynamic courses, and they're starting to get people onto those courses again. But it's gone through a bit of a quiet period where there hasn't been much going on there. But it's starting to pick up again. And I went and visited that place because I was looking if they were doing any biodynamic courses.
Yeah.
And they were doing a 6-week biodynamic gardening course, which was already fully booked. So when I turned up, I just said to one of the guys who was working there, I said, look, I know nothing about farming. I know a bit about biodynamics, but my grandfather has his farm in India.
Yeah.
We're surrounded by nature and wildlife, and I want to do the best I can possibly do for that land. I don't want to come in and have a negative impact on that land. I want to be as beneficial to nature as possible, as respectful to nature as possible. And I feel that biodynamics is the type of farming that allows me to do that. What can I do? Can I do a course? Can I, you know, da 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 da.
Yeah.
So Udo, who's one of the I think he's one of the course facilitators at Emerson. He heard that I wanted to eventually farm in India, and he said, well, okay, if you're interested in biodynamics and you want to farm in India, there's only one person you need to meet, and that's Bryony Young, and she's at Tablehurst, and she's a preparation maker. At that point, I didn't really know what the biodynamic preparations were either.
Okay, they're fascinating, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I get in touch with Bryony, and she seems really nice over the phone, and says, yeah, come over to Tablehurst, and you know, we can have a chat about, you know, farming and also farming in India. But is there a biodynamic scene in India? I didn't really know. I hadn't heard of anything.
Right.
So I turned up at Tablehurst, and there's Bryony on a platform with a 200-liter oak barrel stirring away, and I'm just okay. So, you know, I didn't know what she was doing, so I went up and introduced myself, and that's actually our first meeting was at a vortex, which she fondly remembers. She talks about the vortex kind of sucking me into biodynamics.
Yeah.
And so I mean, obviously, when you meet someone for the first time as they're about to start an hour of dynamizing or stirring, it was the BD 500.
Right.
Instantly, you ask, "What are you doing?" And so we got talking about the vortex and how it's order and chaos and the cosmos and the cosmic aspect of biodynamics, and how, you know, we are currently in a vortex right now. Our Milky Way is a huge giant vortex, and our weather systems are basically a cyclone and anticyclone, and everything in this cosmos is kind of governed by these opposing vortexes of like yin and yang. This lady was just like talking and just explaining what she was doing, and I was always fascinated by cosmology, and I loved physics at school, and so she was just talking my language, and everything she was saying, I was just like, wow, oh my god, this whole thing is getting more and more interesting. And then I said to her, okay, look, you know, everything you said sounds amazing. When can I start? I want to be doing this right now. And I mentioned to her about our land in India, and she said, okay, well, I spend half of my year in India, and I actually, yeah, exactly. And she said, yeah, so I basically, what I do is I bury the preparations in the autumn in the UK. And then she goes to India, buries them in India. And then spends the winter in India teaching and going around India making the biodynamic preparations. Then she lifts them in the spring in India, comes back to the UK and lifts them in the UK. So she's kind of got it completely sorted. She's avoided the British winter basically.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So she just spends the winter and the start of the spring in India, and then she's here for the spring and summer. And,
Okay.
um, and so she was talking about the biodynamic scene in India and how, yeah, it's really, really growing. There was a
Yeah.
guy called Peter who came from New Zealand, and he really got biodynamics like moving in India. And obviously the fact
Okay.
that Indian culture is already very much centered around the cow, and it's
Yeah.
very much
Yeah.
um, a very spiritual place. And obviously like things like cow dung are just used in farming already, so there's not
Yeah.
so much explaining to be done, and a lot of the farmers use lunar calendars. So I think biodynamics just it was an instant fit with India, so it just grew so quickly.
Yeah.
And Bryony said, oh yeah, well there's an amazing biodynamic course that runs every year in December. You have to come to it, and I'm teaching there, so yeah, that's definitely book onto that as soon as you can.
Is that in India
So
or the UK?
no, that's in India.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so every year in December in India, there's a biodynamic course for about 2 weeks, and it's run on the same farm, and it's held by one main farmer, but he's got several other farmers who help him, and
Yeah.
he's just like a fountain of knowledge, and it's one of those things where he has all of the answers. You just have to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's an amazing person to be around. There's not enough time to download all of his wisdom, so you just kind of have to be around him as much as possible.
Yeah.
And so I asked Bryony, okay, India's a really big place. Whereabouts in India is this? And she says, oh, it's in Gujarat. And at that point, that's where my
No,
farm is.
is that where you are?
Yeah,
Yeah. So all this synchronicity, it's yeah.
it was. That was for me the
The
day which
magical, yeah.
when I think of synchronicities, it's
Mm.
that day where things just happen,
Yeah,
one
yeah,
after
yeah,
another.
yeah.
And then so I said, okay, that's it. I'm booking onto that course. But this is all happening when I first met Bryony. This all was happening in April,
Right, yeah.
and so that was December was quite a way away, and I wanted to do something, and especially because now I was so excited about this farming,
Yeah,
I just wanted to start doing it.
yeah.
So Bryony says. So then I said to Bryony, "Can I, I don't know if there's a course at Emerson. Can I just start volunteering on this farm? Are you taking volunteers?" She
Okay.
said, "Well, funny you say that, because we're just starting a volunteering program with a lady called Zoe. Oh, there
Brilliant.
she is. There she is, walking up now. So this is
Ah,
Zoe.
yeah, I love that. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
she just manifests,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and yeah, and basically I'm like, yeah, I'd love to volunteer. She's like, well, do you want to come next week? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So they were doing a weekly Wednesday volunteering.
yeah,
So I started volunteering, and at that point, everything in my life up to that point had been quite a very kind of theoretic, like I was very theory heavy. I
yeah,
spent a lot of time in academics, and I spent a lot of time working in an office. My body wasn't really used to kind of outdoor, manual labor type of work.
yeah,
So actually looking back at it, one day a week was actually probably the perfect way to ease me into this kind of stuff.
yeah.
So I was doing one day a week at Tablehurst, but it was like
Okay.
a full day of whatever the farm needed to do, and also there was a heavy focus on the biodynamic preparations with Bryony. So we really got an insight into someone who works with these preparations, 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah, yeah,
And so learning slowly about these preparations, doing work, being able to actually be outside on a nice summer's day, and
yeah,
picking chamomile, or it was stirring
yeah,
the preparations. All this work just seemed blissful,
yeah.
and
Absolutely. Yeah,
after a few weeks, no, it was after the first month, I said to myself, okay, I think I could do this. I could do this full time. I could definitely kind of volunteer and do this Monday to Friday, Monday to Sunday, whatever.
yeah.
And so I asked Tablehurst if they had any opportunities for a long-term volunteer who could actually live on the farm and work on the farm every day. And unfortunately, they didn't have any accommodation,
Right.
but their sister farm, Plawhatch, which is just 5 minutes away,
Yeah.
they had potential availability. So I went over there to speak to their farm manager, Near,
Yeah.
And I was talking to him, and he said, well, if you're happy to live in a caravan in our garden, you can start next week. I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I started volunteering in the Full Hatch Garden, which is obviously also a biodynamic farm. And yeah, that started basically 7 months of volunteering, where I was living in a caravan in the garden. I mean, you can't be closer to work,
No,
really.
to the land.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
So what
exactly.
was the rhythm of the day? What was the rhythm of the day like on a biodynamic farm?
So wake up. Well, it depends. Obviously, again, biodynamics is so synced in with nature and with the seasons.
Yeah.
Really depends when in the year, but in the height of the summer, because
Yeah.
obviously it's getting light really early, and you want to be
Yeah.
harvesting when it's not too hot. We were getting up really early. Sometimes we'd maybe get up like 4:45, 5.
Yeah.
Um, get the harvest started for the day,
Yeah.
and then pretty much finish up by midday. Because sometimes, especially with the summers we've been having recently, we were
Yeah.
getting 30 plus degree days sometimes in the summer.
Yeah.
And it would be a bit too hot to work. So we'd actually get up really early, have pretty much all of the garden work done by about lunchtime, and then we'd have the afternoon off, which was lovely. We had
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lovely lake nearby, so we could go for wild swimming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the sun was fantastic. It'd be really early mornings, but you'd be done. But then, and then the winter, you would roughly start around 8 a.m., 8:30, and we
Yeah.
used to start the day with this lovely circle where everyone in the garden would sit in a circle, and we'd just go around asking each other how we were. And
Yeah.
it was a genuine "how are you" rather than just a passing "how are you doing." It
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
genuine "how are you,"
Yeah.
and so you could really speak very, very candidly and openly. And it was no one else was meant to kind of say anything. You were just meant to listen.
Yeah.
And it was a really great way of starting the day, not only because you were able to vocalize and actually articulate some of the stuff that was going on up there, which just obviously clears your mind.
Yeah.
Um, but also just it gave you that awareness of how your colleagues, how were they doing. So therefore,
Yeah.
if someone did need a bit of space, you gave them a bit of space. And if someone did snap at you, you kind of knew why they snapped at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
So there's presence. Yeah.
yeah, it just kind of made you really present in the mornings. You start the
Yeah.
day almost with a little meditation, and kind of brings you to the present moment. And
Yeah.
then the mornings would be spent harvesting, because that's really, the morning is obviously when the earth's breathing out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the sap is rising, all the energy and the nutrition of the plant is rising into the plant. So
Yeah.
that's when obviously we're looking to eat food with as much forces as possible, as much
Yeah.
prana as possible.
Yeah.
So we'd
Yeah.
be harvesting in the morning, unless it's a root, because then it's the other side of things, where if in the sun, like in the afternoon and sunset when things are going in, your
Yeah.
roots, obviously that's where all the energy is, and you'll be harvesting the roots in the afternoon.
Afternoon. Yeah.
So that was also really nice to kind of, it gave me an understanding of like how the plants were, the life in the plants, and
Yeah.
how, if I was harvesting a leaf versus harvesting a root, I'd be doing it at different times of day. But I
Yeah.
think in a lot of conventional farms, it's just whenever, you just do it whenever.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
this kind of feeling of being very in sync with nature's rhythms
Yeah.
was another thing I was really seeking, because again, as I mentioned before, the work I was doing was really creating a big kind of mind-body disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas this kind of work was engaging me so mentally, and I was learning so much about so many things, and I was very mentally stimulated, but I was actually, everything that I was kind of experiencing with my mind, I was actually doing with my body as well. And so I
Yeah.
really felt this connection of mind and body. And also another thing, working in the city and working seriously late hours sometimes is really, you get really irregular days. And
Yeah.
so you get thrown out of this natural, all these natural rhythms. And you
Yeah.
hardly ever see the stars. I can't remember the last kind of sunrise and sunset I saw in the city, because all the buildings are so tall.
Yeah.
So just those things, those really simple things of kind of seeing the stars every night, and knowing where the moon was, seeing a
Yeah.
sunrise, sunset, all of these things just kind of started to make me feel a lot more connected to the land, a lot more connected to myself,
Yeah.
and actually kind of start to connect mind and body again. And I
Yeah.
just, in that 7 months I was at Floor Hatch, I went from kind of coming from the city and feeling really unhealthy and quite disconnected to leaving the farm feeling completely nourished, very healthy, really
Yeah.
balanced, really connected, obviously meeting and making so many amazing friends for life, and
Yeah.
really feeling like
Wonderful.
part of the community. And that was a perfect platform for me to then leave Floor Hatch and go to India and go on this biodynamic course that Bryony was on, and then again meet this whole biodynamic community in India,
Yeah.
which I now have, you know, we have a WhatsApp group where it's really active and everyone's talking on it. And
Yeah.
if you have,
Yeah.
if you have a question, if you have any little question about, you know, why is this happening? Why is that happening? You have 150 biodynamic farmers who are all really interested in this kind of thing, giving you amazing answers and wisdom.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that kind of time at Floor Hatch was so crucial, I think, for me, for my body to get used to this kind of work,
Yeah.
but actually just to properly connect back with the land.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And is that progressed? Because Steiner talks about intuitive farming, doesn't he? So when you're talking about connecting with the plants, you know, and things. So are you finding that your senses are becoming more heightened?
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, um, I think that naturally happens also as your awareness increases.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I think, especially when you spend a lot of time with screens, or you're spending a lot of time kind of escaping, or, you know, escaping into an alternative reality or a
Yeah.
virtual reality, you're actually you're numbing your instrument, you're numbing
Yeah.
your and so naturally you don't, you know, you might be seeing the same thing or sensing the same thing, but you're not sensing it to a very deep level. It's kind of just kind of going by. Whereas I found, being on a farm where I would hardly look at my phone,
Yeah.
where I was very much engaged with my present task, I was surrounded by so much beauty and so much, you know, natural greenery and plants and animals, and there was constantly, yeah, I think my senses were being engaged in a whole different way,
Yeah.
where I definitely started to build up a sensitivity, and obviously when you're working with life,
Yeah.
um, you have to be sensitive to life, and
Yeah.
you want to be nourishing it, you want to be helping it. So therefore you have to learn how that thing works. You need to
Yeah.
learn what's good for it, what's bad for it. You have to learn all these different aspects to it, and that awareness and that knowledge then makes you way more sensitive to, when you're in just like a woodland, you're looking at plants in a whole different way. You're looking
Yeah.
at the animals, the flora, the fauna, everything.
Yeah.
Your whole, yeah, your whole experience of that environment just gets enhanced.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just also just kind of the pace of everything. I think you can't just rush through.
Yeah.
And one of the
Yeah.
things that I love about, not all biodynamic farms have it, but a lot of them do. They have the Camp Hill aspect of things, where there are people with learning difficulties
Yeah.
and special needs who are on these farms, and they really make you slow down sometimes. You know, if you're
Yeah.
working with these guys, they're the most amazing people to work with. But you know, sometimes you just have to slow down. You can't just rush through things, and I think
Yeah.
the pace that comes with a lot of this work also helps us to slow down, and I think that naturally makes you also more sensitive to what's going around and what your surroundings are, because when you're kind of just, you know,
Yeah.
sprinting through life, it's very hard to actually take in all that infinite stimulus
Yeah.
around us.
Yeah. And be grounded in your beingness rather
Yeah,
than, yeah,
definitely.
and connected. So it's changed your life dramatically then, you would say.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look back on who I was and where I was a couple of years ago, and yeah, it just seems like a different person, different life. And I think a bit of I think that my part of my personal journey is to also accept that that's a part of me. I think
Yeah,
I think one thing that can happen when you go through a big transformation is to kind of reject that old part,
yeah,
and be like, oh, no, like, you know, this, because once you start to have a slightly more objective, more kind of, yeah, a more objective perspective on that old version of yourself or that old life, you can
yeah,
be actually harsh and critical about it, and
yeah.
start to be like, God, like, well, I was into that and I used to
What
do
was I
that, and
thinking? Yeah, yeah,
exactly. And I think actually that's not so healthy, because those elements of you still exist.
yeah,
They might not be, might not be the driving force that they were before, but they're still elements of them. And I think that whole part of like accepting yourself entirely,
yeah,
um, has been a bit of a journey for me, because yeah, my transition and my kind of transformation and shift has been so drastic. It
yeah,
happened also quickly that, yeah, I think accepting that old version of me, which I don't feel, as I'm not that identified with that old version of me, but I've really had to go through a journey of accepting that old version of me and loving that old version of me.
yeah. Key, loving. Yeah.
Yeah,
And understanding that it was absolutely what was needed in order to lead you where you are now. So
yeah, definitely,
proper.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think because there's still a lot of, you know, who I used to be, there's a lot of people who are still like that, you
Yeah,
know, all over the place. And I
yeah.
think to not have that love and not to have that empathy or that kind of compassion for
For
those type of people,
yourself. Yeah, and that, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think that's been something that's been my personal journey and kind of growth through this, because yeah, I think that's come from there being such a drastic change and transformation so quickly. But I'm very grateful for everything that's happened,
yeah,
um, and the fact that, you know, since I've made that big kind of leap and change, I seem to, everything's just kind of fallen into place, and it feels like, um, yeah, it feels like, you know, the cosmos, the universe,
yeah,
nature,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
very much
Yeah,
helping me along this journey.
it's path.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and I'm surrendering a lot more to it, just kind of allowing this path to unfold,
right.
and kind of just trying to, yeah, trying to trying to kind of, yeah, stay on it as much as possible, essentially, but essentially letting something bigger than me drive it,
Yeah,
and kind of, yeah.
brilliant. So that's quite a good, interesting point with transformation. Could you talk about the preparations and the
Yeah,
elements that are brought in to encourage transformation in the soil? Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, so because I've been working so closely with Bryony,
yeah,
she obviously spent all of her time with the preparations. It's been a real kind of core focus of mine. And I think a lot of biodynamic farmers, they use the preparations, because the preparations, without using the preparations, you can't be a biodynamic farm. But not, I don't think that everyone is fully engaged with the preparations, because it's like you can buy them, they don't necessarily have to be made on your farm.
no, that's
Um,
right. Yeah,
and to use them. But I think having that, I'm so lucky that I've been able to work with someone who actually makes them all from scratch.
yeah,
And and this is true for anything, when you've made something from nothing, and you've made it from scratch, and it's become this substance, or it's
yeah,
become, it's like a meal, you know. It's like if I go and order a meal at a restaurant and I eat that, I can wolf that meal down, because I don't really know all the preparation, all the love, all the care, all the work that's gone into making that meal. And if
yeah,
I make it for myself,
yeah,
or if I've grown the food that's gone
yeah,
into that meal, the way I'm going to engage with that meal is going to be a whole lot different than if
yeah,
it's, you know, I've just bought. So I've been really lucky that my experience with the preparations has been very much one from, you know, actually making them and knowing how they're made,
yeah,
really kind of getting into like what they are, and what level they're working on. And yeah, and so, I mean, to put it simply, I think the preparations are the key to biodynamics, and the key to basically not only regenerating our soil from
yeah,
from a physical perspective, because obviously regenerative agriculture It's all about putting back organic matter into the soil, putting through manures and through through green manures and animal manures, putting organic matter back into the soil, and you kind of regenerate soil and get kind of the humus. And I mean, all of that's fantastic, but it's a very physical way of looking at regeneration.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with biodynamics, it's also a lot about regenerating the forces. And the fact that we live on this living, breathing planet that has a spirit, and it has. And we talk about energy, we talk about gravity, we talk about all of these things, which are these invisible, non-physical energies. And we're surrounded by them, and I think we get taught about these forces in science class, and we get taught about them. They're out there in the cosmos. All these, a black hole can suck in a whole galaxy, but that exists out there. It doesn't exist here. We get like we're in this little vacuum where we don't really have any cosmic forces around us, and all that weird stuff that happens out in the universe doesn't apply around here. And I think the biodynamics was the only, and especially the preparations, really just bring that in and say, wait a minute. If we're talking about healing, if we're talking about regeneration, we have to talk about it also on a level of forces. And so I think the preparations are so key. And the way that Bryony explains what the preparations are, and I like to use it, I mean, it's a bit of an odd analogy because I don't like using tech as the analogy, but I think people just resonate so much with it. But if we were to think of the preparations as like an antenna, and so imagine with your radio and your radio antenna. Now all the radio stations are there in the air, right? Like 95.8, 98.8, whatever. All of these stations are there. But if I don't have the right antenna, I can't tune into those. It doesn't mean that the station isn't there. And I think in the same way, all these cosmic forces are surrounding us all over the place. But they don't necessarily have coherence. They don't have that kind of order. And what the biodynamic preparations do is they allow these forces to be brought in an ordered way with coherence and put into the soil, and then eventually put into the food, so that when we eat our food, we're actually eating food full of forces.
High vibration.
Exactly. And I think one of the really interesting things that Steiner says in his agricultural course, or the lecture that he gave that kind of gave birth to the biodynamic method. He was talking to his right-hand man, Pfeiffer, and he said, and Pfeiffer said, why after so much spiritual practice and all these spiritual endeavors, why are we not seeing so much progress in the world? Why are we, there seems to be this kind of stagnant, there's a stagnancy to spirituality. It doesn't seem like we're evolving. We don't seem to be going anywhere. And Steiner said, well, actually, it's a problem of nutrition. The food that we are eating today doesn't have the vitality, it doesn't have the nutrition, doesn't have the forces that people require to do the work, the hard work. Spiritual development, spiritual evolution is hard work. You need energy, you need forces to raise your vibration up.
Life force and vibe. Absolutely.
And if you're eating dead food, if you're eating processed junk that is there purely to fill you up and not to actually nourish you, how are you then meant to have the energy to spiritually evolve? So that was so Steiner was, that kind of gave birth to biodynamics as its purpose through the biodynamic preparations, and like the Indians would call life force prana. It's that kind of that electricity, that life force, that energy that runs through. And obviously we get our energy through food, water, sunlight. But essentially, for even in Steiner's time in the 1920s, he was talking about the food being, the quality of food really, really going down. And I saw a really alarming statistic where I think it would take something like 30 oranges of today to match an orange in the 1930s in nutrition. This is why, again, we're eating so much more. Like, about, we need to grow all this food to feed the world. Actually, we don't need that much volume. We
Yeah.
need smaller plants, but just much more high density nutrition and forces.
Yeah.
I think for me, that was also something that was so amazing to hear, that we're not only giving to the soil and making sure we have a healthy soil and a healthy earth, which of
Nutrient
course,
rich. Yeah.
yeah, and obviously, and also what we're now finding out through regenerative farming is that a healthy soil is our best solution for sucking up all the carbon emissions in the air, all the stuff that we've put out there through, you know, our industries and
Yeah.
our cars and all that.
Pollution.
That's just,
Yeah.
yeah, all that pollution. And this is the
Yeah.
thing where sustainability talks about everything being net zero and being neutral. Well, okay,
Yeah.
say we stopped all of our emissions today, just like that, we went zero. We
Yeah.
still have tons of stuff in the air that is
Yeah.
still on our planet and still creating all these extreme weather events and all sorts. So actually what we
Yeah.
need to be pulling that down and putting it into the soil. And,
Wow.
and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so soil is that amazing thing that is
Mm.
taking carbon in the air, which is harmful, and putting
Yeah.
it into a solid state
Yeah.
where every gram of carbon in the soil attracts 8 grams of water. So
Wow.
again,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you have this sponge, you have this kind of soil sponge which is holding all your water, which
Yeah.
is then able to grow all your food from.
And it's yeah. Yeah.
So obviously there's that aspect to it, but then obviously with biodynamics, it's about not only doing, obviously it's that, and on
Yeah.
top of that, also looking at things beyond just physical level. And I think that was also another thing I just loved when I really kind of started to see that I think a lot of what's happening with the environmental movements at the moment is very much about trying to connect us back to Earth, which I think is obviously something that we really, really need to do.
Yeah.
And kind of really ground us and get us to, yeah, just feel like we're connected to something. Because, I mean, think about it, when are we not actually physically connected to Earth? Unless you're jumping, you're pretty much stuck to the ground,
Yeah.
aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so so ourself, this whole idea of us being this little separate floating entity,
Yeah.
we are very much earthlings. We're very much connected and kind of rooted to Earth. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, and so that I think there's a really lovely aspect of, you know, all these environmental movements and ecological movements trying to really get us to feel like we're part of nature and we're not separate from it. We are very much part of Earth. And that's what I think regenerative farming does. But biodynamics is the only one that allows us to actually look up and says, okay, of course we are connected to Earth and we are looking down and we are connected to our mother,
Yeah.
but we're also connected to the cosmos and we're also connected to the universe and we're connected to that masculine father
Father
element as
sky.
well.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
uniting the two.
exactly,
Yeah.
and that's exactly. And I think also, you know, when I really think about it, it's like, how can you actually farm naturally and not be aware of the lunar rhythms and not be
Yeah.
aware of this huge, you know, sphere of, you know, this huge sphere that basically creates our tides. And if
Yeah.
it's pulling water up and down in our
The
oceans, of course it's
ocean. Yeah. Yeah.
you
How
know,
can you
pulling water
deny?
up and
Yeah.
down. Exactly. So I
Yeah.
think the fact that other agriculture doesn't even acknowledge that as having an impact and not even having an effect on the plants and the animals and us. I think that's another thing I find with biodynamics. It's a very whole perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a very complete way of producing food. That's not only, you know, year on year building the biodiversity of your farm, building the soil,
Yeah.
putting back more than you're taking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
on top of that, you're also replenishing the soil, the earth of forces, and that's another
Yeah.
thing that Steiner said. The earth is exhausted. The
Yeah.
earth is actually exhausted of forces, and we need to actually be putting forces back into her.
Yeah.
Obviously, whatever we do for the earth, we're doing for ourselves as well, because again, there isn't that separation.
No.
So yeah, so for me, working with the preparations, working with biodynamics, is so crucial to not only replenish and regenerate the forces of earth, but also to do that in ourselves.
Yeah.
And through that, we then raise our vibration, we raise our own kind of spiritual evolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and become kinder, more compassionate beings.
Absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Jahan. That's brilliant. So when will you be going to India and putting all this good practice into action on your land?
So this year, one of the things I've very much let go of is plans. I've
Yeah.
realized you can't really do too much planning.
Yeah.
But the tentative plan at the moment is that I'll probably be trying to head back by kind of mid to late November.
Okay.
We've had a lot of rain this year, so the reason I'm actually not at the farm in India right now, I'm in the UK, is because it's our monsoon. So in India, which is also a real blessing, because farming is quite tricky if you can't predict when it's going to be wet, because obviously when it's raining, you don't really want to be doing anything with the soil. It's the soil's too soft to be having machinery on it, or even doing any work with animals on it. You want to keep things off the soil when it's raining. So for us, we know that we're going to get about 3 to 4 months of heavy rain, where we just let nature do her thing, and then the rest of the time we have a dry season where we do all our work. Whereas in the UK, you might have loads of rain in the winter, or you might have loads of rain in the summer. The rain is kind of all the time.
Yeah.
So it makes farming quite tricky. But with us, we know when our off season is. So this is currently our off season.
Right.
And so I'm back in the UK, helping my parents with the house move, and my grandfather. We spoke to him recently. He said we've had a lot of rain recently. We've had about 140%. So like 100% would be kind of what we expect. We've had 40% extra. Which means that the soil is really wet. And it's kind of pushed our work forward
back.
The future.
Because you don't want to compact it. You don't want to compact it, do you?
Exactly. So the last thing you want to do is degenerate our soil. So in some ways it's really worked out, because this house move that I'm currently helping with has taken longer than planned, and so it means I won't be farming season. So I'm trying to, and so I think we probably won't start farming until the start of December, which is late. We normally start by November. So I'm aiming to kind of be back for the start of the season. And just really kind of go 110% with all the biodynamic preparations and I think one of the things for me, which is also really big, is I want to, which is also why I've really kind of gone back to India, is because India is really, really suffering right now in agriculture. I don't know how much you know about it, but there's a huge problem with farmer suicides.
I do.
Where India was a recipient of the Western Green Revolution, which was all the chemicals basically from the world wars, basically repurposed and sold to Indians as this kind of new way of farming, which involved obviously chemical fertilizers and GM seeds and all this stuff. And obviously with this kind of stuff, it's like giving drugs to your land. I mean, you are going to see, we're going to see initially, you are going to get a high yield, you're going to get bigger crops, but actually, but because you're pumping it full, it becomes dependent on that thing.
Sugar fix.
Exactly. I mean, I heard someone say you're literally making your land like a junkie. It just becomes
absolutely.
And then eventually it becomes sick, because you keep putting this toxic thing onto your land, and you might get a few amazing crops, for 5-6 years, but eventually it's going to ruin your land. And this is what's happening in India. So many people have ruined their soil, but they just don't know how to go back, because they can't just go back to organic, because as we said, organic is kind of neutral. So if you've done damage, to get back to being healthy, you have to do healing. You can't just say, I'm going to remove that thing that's causing the problem. You actually have to actively regenerate, or you have to actively do the work to kind of and do the healing.
Yeah.
So many farmers who were organic before, they can't just go back to being organic. They can't just say, okay, I'm going to stop using these chemicals, because if they do that, their crops will fail. And they can't afford a failed crop, because these people are living on the breadline, they're living on the poverty line, and they rely on that land as their sole income. So I think that's another thing I see biodynamics being an amazing solution for this, because not only are we saying that you can actually heal your land and get it back to being much better than it was before, but we're showing that we're doing this with less input. You're saying you can use, everyone has cows. You're using something that's essentially a waste product. Taking that product and you're making your land better and better every year
by harnessing natural resources.
Exactly. And so your input's going down, but your output's actually increasing, and you're getting better and better output every year. So that's really a way of getting these farmers who have been really tied into these big international multinational corporations, who have really just got them into these subscriptions and just trap these poor guys who don't really know how to get out of this trap. I think biodynamics really allows them to do that, and especially I think with like our farm, we're one of the larger farms in the area. So one of our plans is that because a lot of farmers who have maybe 1 acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, they can't afford to not have a full crop that year. We say to them, how much are you expecting to make in this year? They say X amount. We say, okay, we will guarantee you X amount and pay you a salary if you come and work on our farm, and we absorb your farm temporarily, and we then do the biodynamic practice on that land. They might have a couple of years of not so good production, because obviously their land's sick. So you can imagine if you're really sick and you take away the drugs that I was requiring to kind of be alive. Obviously, in my recovery, I'm going to be a bit weak at the start, but eventually I'm going to go back and be healthy. So the idea is that we absorb that land for maybe a couple of seasons, do the work, do the biodynamic work, and then give them their land back when it's healthy, and say to them, look at your soil now, compare it to where it was before. All you have to do is use these natural biodynamic preparations, and you can have great food for the rest of your life. So that's the plan, and hopefully we can start spreading this and
throughout India.
And at the end of the day, I think the only way we can really make true change is by trying to change and trying to help people around. And kind of create this ripple effect, because I can't change all of India by myself. What I can do is I can help a few farms around us,
and then they pass on the next pay it forward.
And then if I help 5 people, then I've created 5 potentially teachers for 5 more and 5 more, and so you get this multiplier effect. Where,
brilliant.
You just try to help you try to do your bit, and I think that's truly how we're gonna hopefully spread the movement and get some real change going, is through kind of localized
grassroots community work, working together, supporting each other. Very inspiring. Thank you. So I'd love for you to talk again sometime, if that's all right, with your ongoing journey.
Absolutely. I'll stay in touch for sure.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Jahan. I really appreciate that. Okay,
bye. Bye.
Okay, so I think we stopped. Oh no.